If you clicked on this video, you probably also like Marvel, and you've probably been watching the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the past 15 years, and for the most part, you've probably really enjoyed them. The MCU managed to do for superheroes what a lot of people thought was impossible at the time. It took dozens of heroes from multiple franchises, was able to weave their stories together, and in the end, ended up creating the most commercially successful franchise in cinema history. And it did this while maintaining a consistent quality across the board through all their films, ranging from big action popcorn flicks to even a handful of films that I would consider just great films, even without the context of the superhero genre.
We're gonna neutralize a lot of threats before they even happen.
But the punishment usually came after the crime.
For once, we're way ahead of the curve.
By holding a gun to everyone on Earth and calling it protection.
With the guiding hand of Kevin Feige and the filmmakers that were chosen to helm these projects behind the camera, you could confidently walk into a movie, sit down for 2 hours, and knew that you were in for a good time. We could expect a solid story, some fun characters, a few cool action set pieces, and something that was unique to the MCU, the continued payoff of investing your time in watching the previous films.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
Following these characters' stories over the years gave you a sense that you were presented with a piece of a larger puzzle. Not just a single story, but an epic tale that was building towards something that no other film franchise had done before with this level of ambition. And if you didn't love the movie that you just saw as much as you did the last one, you could at least walk away knowing that there was something you saw that was going to pay off in the near future. Now, whether that something was an event that actually happened in the movie itself or a small post-credit tease varied, but there was always something in the movie that would get you excited for what was to come next. Marvel had gotten its hardcore audience to invest in these films by creating well-made, faithful adaptations of their favorite characters.
Wow, this is awesome. Captain America. I know you too. You're great.
And they had even managed to get general audiences on board, caring about the overall universe and where these characters fit into it. So after 10 years of unrivaled success, when credits rolled on Avengers Endgame in 2019 and gave us a satisfying conclusion, a journey 22 films in the making had come to a close. And while some fans saw this as the perfect off-ramp for the franchise, it was clear that this wasn't the end of the MCU, and the majority of us were eagerly awaiting for what was to come next. We'd gotten teases of Sam taking on the role of Captain America, Blade had been announced, as well as sequels to Doctor Strange and Thor, and while not officially announced at the time, it was all but confirmed that we were going to be getting a sequel to Black Panther in the near future. Despite the loss of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, the future of the MCU was looking good, but the world outside the MCU had other plans.
Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic. We have been in frequent contact with our allies, and we are marshaling the full power of the federal government and the private sector to protect the American people.
2020 threw a massive wrench in everyone's plans, and Marvel was no exception. For the MCU, that meant things like filming being delayed, Bob Iger stepping down as the head of Disney, and Bob Chapek stepping in, taking over and taking away the level of creative control that Kevin Feige had become accustomed to under Iger's leadership, and, most notably, the unexpected passing of Chadwick Boseman. The well-oiled machine that was the MCU had found itself in choppy waters for the first time since establishing itself as the dominating force in the superhero genre, and when we did start to get new MCU content in 2021, the cracks were beginning to show. I was, however, at the time, willing to give Feige and crew the benefit of the doubt. I mean, after a run like the Infinity Saga, they had earned that much, right? But now that we've wrapped things up with Phase 4 and are stepping into Act 2 of the Multiverse Saga, I want to take a closer look at some of those cracks and see what hasn't worked and what I think needs to change to correct course. To put things bluntly, Phase 4 was kind of a mess. A lot of what we got in this phase felt like a filler arc and gave us no real concrete direction on what the MCU was building to.
So what's the big deal? What the are we doing out here? I asked you, what in the are we doing here? Hell, I don't know.
And starting off the phase with a movie about a dead character, with events taking place years in the past during a conflict that has already been resolved, isn't exactly the greatest start, and in hindsight, kind of feels like something that should be retconned into Phase 3. Now, I'm not here to say that these movies and shows in Phase 4 were bad. I enjoyed most of them, but they just don't seem to carry any real lasting consequences on the larger MCU in the same way that we've come to expect at this point. Big stuff happens in Phase 4, but it's either at best resolved within one movie, or at worst has so little impact that it might as well not have happened at all. Let's take a look at the Eternals, for example. This movie ends with giant godlike beings not only rising out of the ocean, but one of them standing over one of Earth's major cities and announcing his coming judgment, and then nothing. There is no significant impact on humanity or our heroes for what is potentially the biggest known threat since Thanos and the Snap. An event that was universal in scale, that every human on the planet experienced in one way or another, and now people are just a bit frazzled in the moment. They get over it and don't care about another impending global disaster. I understand that we're not going to get the 2 cents of every hot dog vendor in New York.
He stinks, and I don't like him.
But Wakanda isn't interested in this development. The Sorcerers of Kamar-Taj aren't sending people to investigate the giant god fossil just off the coast in the Indian Ocean.
That doesn't make sense.
Back in Phase 2, when it had been revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. had been Hydra the whole time, there was a major shift in the MCU. Every film dealing with the Avengers after that point had to deal with this and was affected by it.
This is the United Nations we're talking about. It's not the World Security Council. It's not S.H.I.E.L.D. It's not Hydra.
No, but it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change.
That's good.
It created distrust between characters, and it drove their decisions and the story forward. Put that in contrast with another major event from Phase 4 that happened at the end of Loki, where the literal fabric of reality is split, and the stakes again feel disconnected from the scale of the event itself. In a franchise where one government agency, in one country, on one planet, in one universe, can change the whole MCU, it feels a bit off that smashing the MCU into a million different pieces just causes a few bad guys to slip through and it's cleared up and dealt with in the same movie. And when these things continue to happen, it begins to feel like there's no larger plan for what has been dubbed the multiverse saga. This is something that I think the MCU could benefit from changing as we move past Phase 4, because it seems like they're trying to juggle the cosmic side of things and the multiverse side of things all at once. And even if there is some genius behind the madness,
I had a goddamn plan!
It's leading to the perception that there's no real direction and that the MCU is becoming too bloated. I'm just saying that if you're going to commit to calling yourself the Multiverse Saga, maybe stay in that lane and give us as the audience some dots to start connecting. Even for as bad as the Sony Marvel movies have been, there's at least been an attempt to create a larger connection between the fracturing of the multiverse than Marvel's been doing, which brings me to the post-credit scenes of Phase 4. Like I mentioned earlier, the post-credit scenes of an MCU movie have always acted as a nice little nugget to get you excited for what's to come. And with the exception of the ones that are strictly there for comedy, the Adam Warlock one at the end of Guardians 2, and the Spider-Man Homecoming one with Scorpion, every MCU movie has contained at least one post-credit scene that has given us payoff within a year of that film coming out. I'm willing to give Doctor Strange, Wakanda Forever, and Thor a pass since they just came out in the last year, but as far as Shang-Chi, The Eternals, and Spider-Man are concerned, post-credit scenes for all of those have still amounted to nothing almost 2 years later. The way that Phase 4 was handling its post-credit scenes was the earliest sign for me when I started feeling like the MCU was shifting from building its universe to building its cast of celebrity cameos. I didn't feel the need to sit there after the movie in the same way I had in the past because the focus of these scenes had gone from something like, the world now knows who Spider-Man is, to, oh hey, Charlize Theron's in the MCU. And notice I said Charlize Theron and not Clea. I had to look that up because I had forgotten who she was even supposed to be. One issue that any major franchise faces when they reach a certain level of success is that everybody wants in, and the MCU has reached that point. But unlike, say, something like a Star Wars where new characters are introduced all the time by simply just writing them in, we've reached a point in the MCU where most of the big characters, even the ones that non-comic book readers recognize, have already showed up. With the exception of the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, we're really looking at C and D tier characters that have yet to join the MCU. So when a new character shows up in a post-credit scene as their introduction, only the diehards are going to know who they are. And I don't have a problem with big-name celebrities being a part of these movies, but make them an actual character. Set them up to have a role in the plot of the story, because otherwise most people aren't going to see a character there. They're just going to see Harry Styles in a Halloween costume.
Watermelon sugar.
Then you have situations like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where they put cameos in the story, but they do it in the laziest way possible. Here the cameos are just used to do nothing more than get the audience to soy jack at the screen. When you have Professor X, Reed Richards, and Doctor Strange all in the same movie, and the most creative thing you can think to do with them in a story called The multiverse of madness is to have them killed off within a few minutes of showing up in the most unceremonious ways possible.
That does not make sense.
And the reason this is frustrating is because the MCU does know how to do cameos really well. Spider-Man No Way Home is a perfect example of this. It's everything you want in a good cameo. It gave the audience that hit of nostalgia while also giving Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man a way to contribute to the plot without overshadowing Tom's story. This is how character cameos should be handled in something that's called the Multiverse Saga. When you're delving into a creative concept like alternate universes, this is the kind of stuff we should be seeing, because between Ms. Marvel, Moon Knight, and Shang-Chi, we've gotten deeper dives into alternate realms of the MCU than we have alternate universes. Kevin Feige was quoted as saying that as Phase 4 neared its end, we as fans would have a clear idea of where the saga was heading. But if you ask me, things seem just as scrambled and bloated now that Phase 4 is over as it did when it started. Moving into Phase 5 and beyond, I hope the MCU is able to find a bit of focus, but honestly, I'm not sure if things are going to get better for a while, if they ever do. I mean, Guardians 3 looks promising, and I'm interested in the Fantastic Four, and what's going to happen with Captain America. And I'm sure there's going to be some great individual movies, and maybe even some shows over the next couple years. But I'm personally at a point where I don't really feel the need to run out and see these movies or watch these shows day one. Most of the upcoming Disney Plus shows are something that I can't even pretend to get excited about. There's individual characters that I still care about. I'll always be there day one for a Spider-Man movie, and I'm hopeful for the Daredevil reboot, but at a certain point, whether it's due to continuous downgrades in visual effects, oversaturation of content, or a lack of creativity, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is gonna slip away from me. The magic of going to a Marvel movie opening night just isn't there the same way it was for all the films leading up to Endgame. And with the loss of most of their best directors like the Russo brothers, John Watts, and James Gunn not only leaving the MCU, but taking on the lead over at DC, it might be time to admit that the peak of the MCU is behind it. And it feels a little weird saying that as somebody that would have considered themselves an MCU superfan up until maybe a year ago. But it's not like there's a shortage of superhero content out there. Outside of the MCU, you still have things like The Boys or Invincible. And when you throw what DC has in development into the mix, it seems like there's still stuff to get excited about. I still like Marvel, and most of the MCU is still some of the best superhero content out there. But over the last 2 years, the MCU has felt more like homework than genuine entertainment. But maybe if James Gunn and Peter Safran are able to shepherd DC to success, and we continue to see a decline from Marvel, we'll see Marvel start to take some more interesting creative risks that could bring them back and put them on track. Either way, it's going to be an interesting couple years for superhero fans, and there's going to be no shortage of content, whether it ends up being good or bad. But let me know what you think. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.